Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. How is it going? So great to have you out here for this amazing final, right? This is the CVR World Cup League final for the women. And in a minute, we are going to kick this thing off. So who is racing and who are we paying close attention to today? Well, I'm about to show you. It is 24 hours of just great racing today, and you're going to see an exciting race between these two riders. Specifically, Sandra Deegan, who you know pretty well at this point. She's been doing some great racing along the way, and Anja Lewendorf. Very excited to have these two riders on the course today. And I am joined by our guy, Frank Garcia, who will join us in just a second. But 30 seconds from gate drop, let me tell you what we have seen so far. It seems like just a few minutes ago, but it was probably closer to 6, 7 hours ago, we saw the men's A final in the actual A zone. It was 1 a.m. local time when that thing kicked off for me, and it was unbelievable. This course, as you'll see, is showing some fabulous opportunities for great team racing. We'll see if we get it today. And the gate drops, this mixed zone, they all go really, really hard. So many people racing this morning. Anja Lewendorf and, of course, Sandra Deegan kicking off, doing this race themselves. As the gate drops, we search around. We try to find our riders so we can get them in the mix here, see who they are and where they are. And that is part of the exciting thing. Oh, we've got McPhail in there, the PTZ rider. We know him very well because he has shepherded Sandra Deegan over the last 3 races, doing a very, very nice job making sure that she stays where she needs to be. Lewendorf, of course, is the other rider. As we look at Sandra Deegan here, we see that she's got a nice hot start here. You know what? You can get an opportunity to get ahead and maybe even a break. We saw it last night in that men's A finale where Szerzynski and his team Poland managed to pull themselves off the front with a gutsy sprint at the beginning. Now, it was a little bit shocking to see it that early, but excuse me, Gravdal, who is his compatriot, well, his challenger in that head-to-head race, found himself off the back. Team Poland pushed ahead and got a 30-second gap by the second lap in this ultimately flat course. And it was a really shocking turn of events. We thought with the relatively small group that he had that he wasn't going to be able to pull this back all the way. But in fact, he stayed persistent and stayed with it. And the higher heart rate of the challenger, Szerzynski, found himself just a little bit shelled. He ended up losing some of his teammates who just could not sustain the pace. Finally, Szerzynski, his number 1 lieutenant, found himself digging in the back there, and was unable to do much but to maybe sustain him back in the group. He was able to get back in that group again, catch up with Szerzynski and Gravdal together in that group, and they were really able to kind of pull it back together at that time. But what we saw was attack after attack after attack. And it was an exciting thing to see. Maybe one of the best races that we have seen to this point. Okay, as we see Deegan in the group here, we will put our eyes on her competitor here shortly. As I mentioned, that is Anja Lewendorf, who is racing again in this race today. If you're just joining us, this is the planned head-to-head matchup, and I hope, in fact, we see it. We're still efforting to find the competitor in the group. Maybe she's off the front, but Anja Lewendorf and Sandra Deegan have found themselves in this spot for this women's championship race. Now, of course, this is the women's B race, which is one of the many groups and divisions that's playing in here. Sorry, that's the women's A bracket that I'm bringing to you here. Let me try giving you that women's B bracket or the C bracket. We'll eventually get it to you. There you go. That's Anja Lewendorf and, of course, Sandra Deegan together in that group. Not a lot of fireworks happening right now. There's a real possibility that Anja did not, in fact, make the start of this race. That would be tragic, in my opinion, because we want to see all these great competitors. But Lewandorf last week eliminated Lisa Jane Leonard, and Sandra eliminated Amy Fowler in the same way. You look at the path that these women came to get to this point, it's pretty impressive. Terry Cashmore early on, Carissa Min, I called that race. Katarina Salvatierri, Katarina Salvatierri, also in that group. This women's B bracket was strong from the beginning. We saw the climbers come out March 6th when they did the London 8 forward, right? 2 laps of that huge climb. Last week we saw, that was March 13th, Watopia Hilly reverse, a long, not incredibly steep, but sustained climb where Anya managed to shell Leonard. And of course, Sandra was able to, with the help of her forever teammate, and McPhail, who's in the group today, managed to get themselves enough of a gap that Amy Fowler was never able to close it down completely. Now, as we're trying to find our competitor, Lewandorf here, we see a number of other people in this race, but Sandra Deegan may, in fact, today be winner by default, because we do not see Anya Lewandorf in the lineup here. She had confirmed that she was going to do it, but we have seen some absenteeism throughout this postseason, right? Folks lined up and set to be racers, but work sometimes, but family doesn't allow them to align with those zones as they'd hoped. As we glance backwards in these groups, we're trying to find her, but it looks like even if she's here, she did not grab the group. It is clear that Sandra Deegan is not next to her compatriot in that group. As we look around, there's no Lewandorf in that. But as usual, McPhail, her lieutenant, there to shepherd her to the finish line, who's done a really, really nice job of setting the pace. Only a couple of times in this process have they found themselves in a spot of bother. As we look at this group now overhead, looking at Joachim Plommers from Team Experimental. He is one of these riders who was very active early on in those cycles. But we don't see her here. It appears that Sandra Deegan is going to be able to win this division. We're going to focus on a couple of things. Specifically, what's going on in this men's A race. We want to bring you every possible race that we can, and make sure that we're doing this. We'll keep an eye on Sandra Deegan here. We'll check in with her as we see her now. She just comes to the front of her own group. We'll give it back to you there for a second. She's right there at the front, which she can be, right? This appears to be, for all intents and purposes, the B group, the chase group. And the men's A race is the one that we're going to shift our attention to just briefly here, maybe throughout the race, to make sure that we tell that story pretty well. Now, Joachim Plommers is a guy who has been in a number of different events. Right, he and I met for the first time in CVR London, the World Cup London race, held in Shoreditch, in a really cool converted tube station or train station. Hard to tell because 50 years ago that thing was active. But Plommers did a great job in that race, showing everyone why he's strong enough to be at these kinds of events. But now he's going to try to put together something special here. And we see a couple of other Kopsy in this race as well, the Russian Federation rider. There's some, and Hendricks, the UAW rider, also in this group. Some riders doing a nice job. Very interesting. We're just getting this back from the team car that she was in the pen. Lewandorf was in the pen, but did not exit the pen, did not leave the pen. Very real possibility that she had a mechanical, maybe a dropout, maybe a power failure, something like that. We know that she was there, but she's not in that group now. Now, there are a couple of other riders in this men's A group that we should pay close attention to, since we're going to give you a great race to call here. We see Quentin Lefay in that group as well, another CVR World Cup veteran and a proper good dude. He's one of these guys that I've met before that is, he's everything that you would hate about a guy, right? LaFay is good looking. He's very kind. He speaks multiple languages. And if I didn't already like him, I would have to hate his guts. He's that kind of, he's a beautiful human being. He's a specimen. He's a guy I don't want my wife to look at very much, right? I mean, some some concerns there that he might be a little bit too beautiful. Well, Plommers is hanging in here, Team Experimental, and trying to make sure that he is close enough to the front. These guys are cooking right now, but not cooking that much, right? This A group knows what's coming up. They're just looking around to see who's going to start throwing attacks. As we saw last night, and this is a good time to bring in our guy Frank Garcia, excuse me, to talk about just the character of the crit of this race last night. It was like a crit last night. It was really impressive. What made it so much like a crit, Frank?
Well, I think what we see here is more standard Zwift racing in terms of kind of hand-holding here on the flats, sort of setting up for the sprints. There might be a few attacks, but every man is in for himself. Every woman is in for herself. And as we look at it, they race conservatively because they're not racing with a team. But what we saw last night, when there's only one person who can win, I always call them the
kick
Patron.
at the front here by Bosun. Yes,
so,
they're starting to animate it just a little bit as they come up this hill, which tends to be the spot 10 watts per kilo. Plus, we see a 12 in there, and 11. Colley, Hendricks, Offendal, Plommers trying to hang on there. I do not see Wakopsi just a second behind him, but they're going to really drill it as they come up. And these big gaps form. That could be dangerous if they can't close those quick. We'll see what kind of speed they get up and over the top here, but that's very much like a crit, as we talked a moment ago, Frank. There is a gap in this group now, 3 seconds with Hendricks, Kofdal, and KW off the front of this group. We're looking at Plommers now as they come through this really tricky section where the radar doesn't quite work right, but they're trying to close this down now. We see these riders in the group doing everything they can to close that gap, but the question is, who will it be on the front that makes that happen? 4 seconds now to Bosun and Offdal at the back of that group. Ortiz trying to close that gap now, and all these other riders, KW from BRT, all in there as well. Sorry, continue with this idea. I mean, we just saw it there. There was a little opportunity, and the group exploded, but nothing seems to be on so long of a string that they can't, hand over hand pull it back.
Well, and what you see here, though, is a little bit more hesitancy. So last night you've got teams because you've got a Patron. One person only can win on your team. So the rest of the riders naturally ride for that team. So they'll bury themselves to pull somebody back. They'll bury themselves for attacks. And so what you get is constant attacking out of every corner, up every little hill here on this flat course. People will dig. And for instance, last night, we were, here they're going pretty hard. So they're up over 50 kilometers per hour. But they did that most of the time last night, really kept the pace high and with attacks.
And it looks like they're about to pull them back. They come onto the red carpet. They can see them. It's been about 3 seconds for a little bit, but this little downhill section tends to favor the larger group, and it looks like they're, in fact, going to pull that gap back here in the next little bit. They're not willing to give it up. They'd like these boys to work a little bit harder, but I don't think they see this as a breakaway, more of just an animation of the race. Now, Plommers getting lots of love from the folks who are watching this, and they should. There's so many places that you can watch this, so many opportunities to enjoy and to participate. One of those is to watch in the game and give those guys a ride on. There we go. Plommers comes to the front, takes his turn, trying to pull this all the way back. The question is, how much work do you spend right here for an A win in this race? There isn't a dog in the fight, as it were. There's no team, no protected rider. What are these guys riding for in this last race, Frank? I mean, what can they hope to get out of this?
I think in terms of this one, it's just bragging rights. What we see in the CVR World Cup races is they're a little longer, so they require a little bit more endurance. And some of these might be, I think most of the people are traveling. They're going to be in the World Cup. So I don't see any of the World Cup guys out here just, getting their legs warmed up for the weekend. So I think this is going to be mostly bragging rights.
Yeah, I think you're right. We'll do a quick check-in again with looks to be our women's B postseason winner. Due to mechanical, that never is as much fun. It's got to feel, in a sense, satisfying to know that she's done, but she never would want to do that, and have to find herself racing without, an opponent, as it were. I'm sure she'd much rather race here against Lewandorf, but it doesn't appear that she made that start, which is unfortunate. Mechanical, something else. She was in the pen, prevented her from starting. But Deegan now in that main group. If you're just joining us, the matchup that we had hoped to see this morning, very specifically, was Lewandorf and Anya. Well, excuse me, Anya Lewandorf and Sandra Deegan, who were going to battle it out for this women's A bracket. But instead, we just see Sandra Deegan in the group. It doesn't look like Lewandorf was able to make the start, although she was in the pen. And that's a sad thing to see, but that's racing, right? Have you ever dropped a chain on the start line, Frank?
I have dropped a chain on the start line. In normal road racing, usually that's not a complete disaster because things start a little bit more sedate. But in Zwift, that's game over. If you have a glitch, if your devices went to sleep, any number of things can happen. If you're out of your standard routine, maybe you got in early, some stuff like that. And I think you showed the men's race, the head-to-head that was coming up a little bit later. I don't think you got the ladies' race, but I might have missed that, Chris.
Yep. Yep. Well, there are a couple of different races coming up as we eyeball here the group that has come back together. They managed to pull these guys back, and so a lot of those guys are back in. Well, no, I take that back. They're still gapped off the back there. Phillips seems to be one of the top riders in this, but they're still sitting. Plummer sitting 13th, and as I do my math, I count up there 1, 2, 3, carry the 1, take off a shoe. There are still another 5 riders up the road that are unaccounted for in his field of view, starting to pass some of those C riders. 15 seconds. I just peeked at it. 17, 18 seconds as they come by Big Ben here, virtual Big Ben, down through Whitehall. We see that those guys have really put together a gap, but you'll notice Plommers, especially, they're not doing much work. But as we jump into Oftedal, there we find that this is the group. This is the group we got to pay close attention to. As they're coming up and over this hill, they're going to kick it into high gear. That race that we were talking about very specifically a moment ago. I think they're working together now, just trying to get away. But that race that we were talking about very specifically coming up in a little bit is another Lewandorf. In this case, Stefan Lewandorf against Mark Min in that men's B finale coming up in just 2.5 hours here. Those guys will show up and do some work today. But that's not the only great race still on the docket today. We've got a really nice women's C finale coming up with Muldoon and Stefan. Actually, well, I got to get my time zones worked out. I just had this fear, Frank, that one had already happened, but it hasn't. It has. Yep. So and the final race that you can look forward to today, other than the one that we just mentioned a moment ago, is the Simon Nielsen and Hadamaki, who are going to race here in just a little bit. You can check those out at different times today, and you definitely want to, because it's a lot of fun to see these head-to-heads. Unfortunately, we're without a head-to-head today. because the racers in this group have found themselves essentially alone, right? Sandra Deegan, who is the race that we intended to follow today, finds herself without an opponent, lined up in the start, but did not leave. That's always a concerning thing. Mechanical, physiological. Who knows? Who knows what happens? Maybe it was a family flat. At my house, I get kid flats, it seems, or wife flats on a regular basis when I'm out there. Things you have to address, but that wouldn't stop you, I don't think, from one of these. Okay, so we have seen some animation definitely on the front here, and those guys are trying to pull this back somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 seconds. Is that gap for that lead group? And as we focus on their efforts at the front, this men's A group, we're looking at a few of these guys, Copsey in that group, also Plommers in the chase group. And it doesn't look like they are that concerned about catching those riders. However, we saw that lack of concern last night or this morning, however you want to think about it, in the eyes of Gravdal, who found himself just kind of chilling at the back. As he was the patron, the marked rider there, the one that everyone was caring for. And we saw him just be patient, 20 beats per minute at times lower than Szerzynski and Team Poland team.
Yeah, I think what you're
But he managed to pull that back, Frank. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what you see here is, as we all know, I think you've got a flagged rider up there. You've got Bozjan doing, 7 watts per kilogram, 6 watts per kilogram, and I think his average is probably over the 5 watts per kilogram. So I think a lot of the racers are saying, hey, we're going to let those guys go and keep the race here to themselves, the known quantities here in Zwift today. So I think that's a little bit that's happened. There's some rules that say you can't follow a flagged rider in CVR World Cup, and so I think that's what you see. The guys who are in the league mostly are just letting that go.
That is very interesting, and we see Igor right there. It is his view that we are following right now, which is a great spot to be. He has battled it out with Plommers a few times this semester. Excuse me. You can tell I'm a teacher, but this year he's done that a few times. And they know each other really well. They race in similar zones. I'm still impressed to see Quentin Lefay, the Vision rider, hanging on the back of that group. He has not been shelled despite the effort there. He's a world-class guy as well. But as we look around this group, this is one of those courses that favors bigger guys, frankly. Bigger guys tend to, on the flats, put out more power. Quentin is not a bigger guy. Maybe why we're seeing him tail gunning a little bit here. As they're in the virtual world, what is your sense of how a rider's weight may benefit them or hurt them on a flat course like this? We know what it does when you hit a hill. It's the lighter riders that tend to do the most damage on a hill. But what about bigger, more muscly, taller guys with more kilos and maybe more watts in a space like this?
Yeah, generally Zwift tends to favor being a little bit lighter, as cycling does in general. But I think in Zwift it's maybe slightly exaggerated. But on a day like today, when you're on the flats, pure watts matter, and the bigger, heavier guys can put out more pure watts, and therefore your watts per kilogram as a lighter rider, you have to hold them higher than you normally would. So on the hills, it's advantage lighter rider. On the flats, and we see it here with Quentin sort of dangling off the back, it's advantage the heavier, the riders who can put out more pure watts. It's not so much a watts per kilogram play. And this is the reason I, as a sprinter, favor these. So I'm, got a little bit more weight, shall we say? I'm gonna chalk that up to muscles, but to each their own. I'm probably carrying a little bit of the holidays with me still,
yes,
as well. but that doesn't hurt you so much on the flat course. And so having a little bit of extra muscle mass and being able to produce more pure watts is key on these flat courses.
Pure watts. That is the key. We're checking in again with Sandra Deegan to make sure that she is doing well in her race, and she is right in the body of that B group, finding herself, as high as 5th or 6th. A couple of the B riders did get off the front of this group, but showing why she is as strong as she is and why she deserves to be in this. Savvy rider. This is exciting because the winner of this one, who we mentioned just a little bit ago, and we'll show you the graphic because so many people like to see it, is that the winner of this, Lewendorf, and yes, she is. She's still going hard. Lewendorf and Deegan is going to get an invitation to the next CVR event. Not this one this week in Los Angeles, which we're excited to get out to and see, but the next one, which you have announced is going to be in Canada, but you have not actually announced the city. But this week is the one that you're going to want to tune in for. Saturday, March 24th and Sunday, March 25th, the CVR World Cup Major in Los Angeles.
Exactly. But a slight correction there. This is the women's B bracket. So they get a nice,
oh, that's right. That's
some
right.
prizes, whatever, but they don't end up going to the World Cup in Canada. It'll be either Ontario or Vancouver. That is getting finalized as we speak, and we'll announce that this weekend in Los Angeles from the big event.
From the big event, the major. What is the character of this event on Saturday and Sunday that really qualifies it in your mind as a major? When you think about the hierarchy of how these events work, what's your sense of these events and how you want to categorize them? This one, of course, Frank, being described as a major.
Well, I think one of the things that we look at is I was reading a press release the other day, and someone on the team was like, just after 2 years, and started going on, and I was like, nope, it hasn't even been 1 full year yet. We did our CVR World Cup kickoff last April, early April, and so it's only been a year. So the kickoff was setting the stage that this is the time period that we would be doing the major in, and so we're doing that this year. So the major is bigger, better, badder, bigger prize purses. Certainly we're through the winter season on Zwift, so there's the most people on Zwift during that period of time, the most competition, and so you get the best and brightest from across the world. We do 8 zones across the world, so throughout all the zones from all over the world. So we do it by time. But that usually ends up meaning geography. We have racers coming from all over the world to race, both men and women, and that's really what makes it, the major. It's, well, the other reason that makes it the major is we call it the major, Chris, and that gives it its significance and its importance.
It goes a long way when you call it the major. Checking in again with the men's race here. We find our guy, Vision rider Quentin LeFay, in that group. Plommers also present, Copsey also in that group. But they're chasing now what I believe to be 4 organized riders off the front there in this men's A race. But we're not seeing them. They're out of view. Probably stretching it to 25 or 30 seconds. We'll get that gap for you in just a little bit. But you mentioned some of these riders that are going to be participating in that group. And while there are no fireworks, we'll jump away and tell you what you should look for. On Saturday morning at about just a little after 10, right, you're going to see the women's heat number 1, Beth York, Cheryl Muldoon, whose name we mentioned just a little bit ago, Claudia Bering, Emily Joyner, Holly Grable. Now you'll notice that a few of these folks have a have a little letter underneath their names. Some of them are winners of categories, right? Emily Joyner is the A zone winner. Holly Gable, next to her is an invitee, right? And so why are we seeing both winners and invitees, and what does it take, Frank, to become an invitee in a race like this?
Well, winning the ITU long course World Championships or being second in Ironman is a good way to get in. Winning a Zwift National Championship is also a good way to get in. So being a world-class athlete that maybe isn't on Zwift, in the case of Lionel Sanders, for instance, or being a Zwift national champion that didn't make it through the CVR League, maybe finished second in their zone, and then they might get an invite that way.
Well, these are well-matched riders is essentially what you're telling us. Whether they climbed the ladder or they deserve to be there and receive that invitation, they got there. Now, some of these names, folks who watch these broadcasts know really well. Casey Schum in there, Dan Netzer, Eric Sorensen, Frank Levick, or do we say Levick? You know what? I'll have to ask him when I see him. Gavin Arbour, who I absolutely adore, who I met in London. Matthew Drujean, who we first met of course, in Paris. Mati Pikelny, tell me a little bit about him, if you can. Moti, I'm sorry.
I'm going to have to pull up the bio on that. Give me
He's an Aquarius. He likes long walks on the beach. But his discipline, I don't remember his discipline. That's really the question I'm asking there.
And I don't remember it off the top of my head either, Chris, but I'll get it for you.
Okay, well, he is another one of those qualifiers of a different approach. Stefan Stevanov is going to be there. Soren Bay. That is a name that should strike fear into the rest of this group. Well, from that men's heat, 5 will advance. 5 will they'll all advance, but to different races. The top 5 in that race will advance to the bracket on Sunday. The other 5 will advance to the performance bracket. Prize money all around available for those riders, but to put themselves, it's almost kind of, you're familiar a little bit with Swiss play, Frank, which is really common now in esports. How much do you know about Swiss play and Swiss bracketing?
Well, tell me more about it, Chris. But first, I wanted to give a little shout out here to Quentin.
Yep.
And I'm going to tell Quentin I am not moving off of him. And he better stay with the race, or it's going to be really boring if we're just watching him. So, Quentin, go harder. You got a little room on the heart rate, 5 beats.
Yeah.
But I don't know. We were talking about holes and cheese and something about Swiss cheese, but maybe it was brackets and esports, Chris. So enlighten me.
So Swiss play is really common in esports, in lots of different tournament types of situations. Swiss play simply means that each week you are matched against somebody with a similar record. So if it's a game like League of Legends or Overwatch, and you take a loss the first week and you're 0-1, you get matched against another 0-1 team, right? Your competition gets normalized a little bit. The problem is you don't know who you're going to race. Well, in a sense, you've created Swiss play in these brackets for the men and women here because as the top 5 riders from the opening day, that Heat 1, Heat 2, Heat 3, Heat 4, the top 5 riders will advance to race another 5 riders who have done the same thing that they have. And in the performance bracket, they're going to be racing, again, racers of very, very similar skill sets, right? Or they've demonstrated the same type of performance up against. So it actually makes for better racing. It makes for really tricky scheduling, right? Because you can't look at a season and know who you're going to match up against, right? Well, who do we have in week 3? I don't know. We'll take on someone in week 3 who has the same record that we do, right? You don't know. But in an event like this, it continues to bring tighter competition together. Swiss play is a very interesting thing, and it's both universally loved and hated, depending on how you feel it's there. Now, for the top teams, they'd love to have an easy schedule where they've only got one or two tough matchups each, every once in a while. But instead, they're always having to duke it out with people who are at the top. Teams that are undefeated tend to get really grumpy because they want to be able to play, the weaker teams. Well, why do we have to go against the top teams every week? That's Swiss play is not universally loved. It has its detractors, but in a sense of providing something better for the fans, no blowouts, as it were, it is really fabulous. Men's Heat 3, which the men's heats are going to be back-to-back in this race. And I don't want to get too far away from the race that we're calling here, but I definitely want to call attention to a couple of heavy hitters in this group. Men's Heat 3 on Saturday appears to be the one you cannot miss. Adam Zimmerman in that group. Kim Little and the Terminator himself, Lionel Sanders, in that group. Tell us a little bit about the makeup of this field.
This is a strong field. Both men's heats are very strong, and they have a little bit of maybe trepidation, to see who makes it through. You've got 5, 6 strong guys in both races. I mean, super strong guys. I mean, here you look at when you had that up, you had Adam Zimmerman, Zwift U.S. national champion. You've got Kim Little, UK national champion, Lionel Sanders, current ITU long course world champion, also finished second at Ironman World Championships in Kona. Gardner's very strong. Mike Davis, Helen Cycles, so he's going to be a hometown favorite. We look to see him bring lots of people into the venue. And it makes a huge difference when people are standing around you and yelling and screaming as well. And then you've got, I don't know how to pronounce his name exactly, Sadeto Abeki from Japan in as well. And so, very, very interesting play. So he comes from a very strong zone as well. And it's going to be lights out fireworks just to make the elite bracket for Sunday.
Oh boy, it is. I mean, that is one of the most exciting races. That's where you come. You want to make that elite bracket. You want to get to that position. As we check back in with Sandra Deegan, she is doing an outstanding job staying in that group, and she and her teammate are doing a really, really nice job. PTZ has impressed me this year. I'm not going to lie. Look at all the PTZ jerseys there surrounding her, making sure that she can actually come away with this win today. As we spoke earlier, Anya Lewendorf lined up in the start pen, unable to actually venture out onto the course. And that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I got a little bit more information. I think there was an injury actually, and I think people have been so dedicated, put 12 weeks in of extremely hard work, and she lined up. She wanted to go, but it just wasn't in the cards. And we hope she has a quick recovery, and all the best to her. And that's unfortunate, and you hate to get to the last week. Last race and not be able to go, so I know that's a little bit of a heartbreak, but we wish her the best and hope to see her in the spring season. Quick recovery.
Yes, yeah, and that is bike racing. Illness, injury, mechanical, they're all part of it. It's never fair, right? You and I have had this conversation before.
And that highlights physical esports, right? Cyclogen is about physical esports. This, if you're, you can have injury in esports. You can have, thumbs and hands injuries and that sort of stuff. But when you're going super hard, heart rates of 180 for an hour, week in and week out, that takes a toll. And you can't hop on with the cold or a flu and compete. And sometimes you get some overuse injuries or other sorts of things. And
Yeah,
let's take
very
Cheryl,
true.
who last in the C zone was set up to race. She couldn't go today because she's at the CVR World Cup training camp just outside of LA right now. She won a bid there through CVR World Cup training, and she crashed. So she went down, and she's okay, but she's got, she's sore, and she won't be able to go for a couple of days. Hopefully she'll still be able to compete in LA. We're hoping her a quick recovery as well. But that's bike racing, and it happens. I've even almost fallen off my trainer. So it can even happen indoors.
Yeah, it has happened indoors. I can attest. I have had no less than 3 garage crashes. There's always a danger. You might ask yourself, 1, I can understand. 2, that's maybe a pattern. But a 3rd one, oh, that's just embarrassing. And you know what? You're right. You're right. So we're seeing some fireworks happening now in that men's A group as they're trying to catch on. That is really, really interesting. Now, you're seeing that B, even though this is an A grouping, you can see the orange A over on the side in their names in the riders nearby list. But the reason you're seeing that B is because the watcher actually lined up in the B group originally to follow the second rider in this. And so if you're like, are we watching an A race, a B race, that can be just a little bit confusing. But the location of the watcher or who maybe it's your bike, will always show where you are. That's just an interesting characteristic. It just happens to be next to the here's who you're watching list. So a question for you. As we have moved through this postseason, we had 8 weeks of regular season. People got points based on the way they finished. We're going to check in with Sandra here real quick, who is showing everyone why she is so strong. That's right. She's leading that group right now. She's setting the pace. She wants to get a nice effort out of this. She doesn't want to be towed to the line. She wants to do her share and even help her teammates now. She knows she doesn't have a competitor in the field, so she may actually be doing the work for other teammates as well in that process, trying to help them climb up this B ladder and maybe even get on that B podium.
Well, as
we jump back in with the group here, we see Plommers and Copsey and, of course, Quentin LeFay in that group. Sorry, let me jump back to that question I asked you.
Well, I think one of the interesting things that you were showing is, and you mentioned it earlier, PTZ has really impressed me as well in terms of how they've worked together as a team. Team Poland has also done a fantastic job. And so, I don't know, I think we're going to have to come up with a team of the tournament. And I think right now the running has to be between Team Poland, who did an absolutely yeoman's job earlier today in the men's A final, winning the sprint by a fraction of a second, but a fantastic lead out, very coordinated. And then you've seen a lot of that from Team PTZ as well, and you see that here today. So maybe we'll announce a team of the tournament. I think that'd be kind of fun, and see if we can rile up some of the other teams, and because that always you want to have the bragging rights for that.
Yeah, you do. You want to rile them up here. Stefan Lewendorf, you know what? You can jump in and let us know how things are going and who you think is going to do this. We've got a lot of great folks who have checked in here. BJ Alfonso, of course, the director sportif of Team PTZ, telling his team and Sandra Deegan to go, go, go. But Dixie Newsom, who we know well, loves this B bracket. Yeah, and she heard my misspeak, and I want to apologize, Dixie. I did in fact say that the B bracket was going to get an invite, and I was mistaken. I forgot what bracket I was in. That'll happen sometimes to the next CVR, but it's that A bracket. So many apologies there. Corrections all about. But let us know who you think is going to climb up this ladder in this. Maybe it's just a field sprint here between these folks. It's hard to tell now what that gap is. They're so far off the front that they're not showing up comfortably in that rider list. Now, we don't know what the front of that men's A list looks like. We're kind of focused on this mid group here. Thrum, the German rider, and all of those around him, including Plommers and Lefay, and the BRT rider KW.
And just to keep everybody sort of informed, they're about a minute up the road. But again, you've got a group there with a flagged rider, and so we're just gonna let them go have their own fun and stay on the individuals who let that group go in accordance with the rules. And that's one of the things we do here at CVR World Cup. We think about the rules, and we execute on those, and we think it makes for great racing. And this just goes to show that, highlighted a little bit here today in Zone D. We are in Zone D, I believe. Please help me out here, Chris, because it's been a whirlwind of races today, starting, I think it was about 9 or 10 hours ago, and I think we're in Zone D. So
that is in fact correct. We are in Zone D. This is the Zone D race. We had some calls earlier today. Some of you watching now probably watched one of those earlier races, and you'd be wise to do so. We do have Zone E coming up in just a little over 2 hours time, and then at 3 p.m. Pacific, we'll have the final race that you and I will call today, which will be that Zone F, and there are some great matchups in those. I don't want to get too far away from the Los Angeles schedule here, because it is really looking to be a lot of fun. That opening day, that women's race, we'll know very quickly what the men's heat is going to look like, but we're going to have to wait until the end of the day, 4:15 Pacific, to know what that women's bracket is going to look like there. That's where this is going to get exciting. Now, as we look around that list there, that start list, we see some interesting lineups there. Allison, right? Athena, who I don't know well at all. Carrie Conaber, who we've seen some heroics and some tragedy in her racing previously. Esther, who first joined us at the CVR World Cup Paris. As you look at this lineup, what are your thoughts on these folks, Frank?
Well, I think you've got a number of very strong people there. Obviously, Kabuta, Esther, and Carrie, a perennial favorite, to make it into the finals. But that highlights something, and you sort of mentioned it. In Paris, she had an off day on the first day, and that cost her getting into the elite bracket. I doubt that'll be the case this time. I'm sure she's going to be going all out and dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's. But it happens. This is a physical sport, so if you have some allergies or something kicks in, or you had you ate something that didn't agree with you, or your travel tired you out, then certainly that can have an impact, especially on the first day, and that's what makes the heat so exciting. I think what else makes the heats exciting is that the racers, both the performance athletes that came through training, so it's about how well they trained and being well matched power wise, versus elite winners week in and week out. So these guys get to rub shoulders with the national champions, both on the female and the male side, ITU long course world champions, triathlete champions, and it's just a lot of fun. But there's a lot of stress in it as well, and it's it's about a 40-minute race that decides your fate as to whether you go into the elite or performance brackets on Sunday.
It does, and you mentioned here, and it just sticks in my mind, that this is a physical esport. And so while, yes, there are lots of computers and endemics and things like that, the people who really are supporting this, Sarah, Cyclops, PowerTap, Garneau, are all physical sport companies that are involved in an esports competition. Helen Cycles, of course, the Hunter Allen Peaks coaching group, and Cyclogen, right? Says it right there, physical esports, all of them. coming together to support this event and to make it everything that it can be. And it's exciting to think that those folks are going to be out there with us and rubbing shoulders with these sweaty riders as they do their thing. I should point out Allison Kubota, who is on the she's viewing it live right now, wants to know, and I didn't spot this, Frank, who is the flagged rider? Didn't spot a flagged rider out there myself, but if you can effort the answer to that, I would love to know myself. As we mentioned, we showed up today to watch this exciting B bracket for the women, as we saw Anya Lewandorf face off against Sandra Deegan, who we have seen week after week brings a team around her, and they do an amazing job to keep her in it. But Anya did not make the start. Illness, injury, as sometimes will happen in a race like this, she was unable to make that start. And so she's going to have to reset, get ready for next season, recover, and get herself where she needs to be so that we can enjoy her amazing racing and talent. Yes.
And in the men's race, the bell is ringing. We are on the last lap. They're making good time. And Sandra will be coming around to the last lap here in about 2.5 kilometers, I think. I think it's about 3 kilometers from that turn to the finish.
Yep.
And I'll mention, so a couple of ways to see the flagged riders.
As we look right now, go ahead.
So on the flagged riders, I don't normally call them out on broadcast, but I'll give you a hint. The best way to see who the flagged riders are is to go to cycledata.cvrworldcup.com and click on live results, and then you can see the different flags for the different riders, who's wearing heart rate monitors. It just gives you the ability as a racer in real time to know who you should follow and who you shouldn't, because if you don't know, it's hard to follow the rules. So that's the hint on how to check that out. And as we set up for the final, just shout out to CycleView. We've got Copsay, who is streaming. He's always a lot of fun to watch. He's got, face grimaces, and he really goes all out, especially during the sprint. So you can catch him on CycleView as well. And I'll give a little teaser here. We have some exciting announcements coming this weekend with regards to streaming, and that'll be improving how we pull riders in that you can watch all the time as well. And I think maybe, Chris, you're going to be able to bring up maybe a full screen on that, and we'll take a look. Yep, you can just hit that right there, or just wiggle your mouse. Yeah, just up a little bit, maybe. There you go. There you go. Go full screen.
There we go. Oh, Igor doing his thing. Now, very impressive as he lines up. Now, 43 kilometers is what we're looking at here for the big finish. Now, we see his time just a little bit behind as this group comes up, but you can see the courage on his face. He has given us some fabulous looks in the past. Perhaps we'll check in with him here in just a moment. But if you looked over his head, he actually has a projector mounted over his head, over the ceiling, so that he could actually watch it full scale on a wall. I would love for him to post what his bike room looks like somewhere. I've never seen it, and I think it would be fabulous, in fact, to see. So that would be really fun to watch there. But you can tune in with as many riders as you want. Yes, that's a good point. Their mixer has some standards. They want you to keep your shirt on. This is not this is not a.
That's because they've never done physical esports. You get hot. You got the fan on. Now I don't normally stream because nobody wants to see me with my shirt off. But that is normally
clearly
how I ride. Well, thanks, Chris.
No one wants to see that. But if you were to go over to CycleView right now, you could actually, in fact, watch him. Now, there's just a little bit of a delay. He's back in time just a little bit, but doing everything he can to stay. That's the intensity that CycleView brings you, and the streamers who get more points when they stream, because, again, we want to see their efforts. We want to connect with them as individuals. But Igor doing a nice job of staying in that group again, now as we come by Big Bend the last time for this A group, they are going to be lining up and looking for those chances to get, away from this group. There's some good sprinters in this group, but I wonder, is there someone who is more favored in your mind than another? Who do we have here in this group besides Plommers, right? Unfortunately, the KRT rider, each time he bounces around, it's tricky to see his name. It says Get Well Rachel on the end. It looks to be a Marriott, also in that group. That's very nice that they give those Get Well Rachels and whoever is in need of help. But you also see Quentin LaFay in this group. No disrespect to Quentin LaFay, but he's never struck me as a superpower sprinter, more as a climber, all-around kind of guy. But who's your kind of favorite?
Plommers is sort of the same way, not super huge sprint, a magnificent climber, but maybe has a little bit more difficulty with the sprints, as magnificent climbers often do. Being a sprinter, obviously can't climb very well most of the time, it seems. So I'm on Kopse here because I think Kopse has an excellent chance of winning out of this bunch, and so that's what we're going to sort of stick with here. Maybe we'll switch off if it looks like it's shaping up a little bit differently. But you see Kopse moving to the front here. This is the spot where you start to do that, and we make this U-turn.
Yeah.
And sort of the 1 kilometer kite. I always think people should go right around this corner if you can go long. That would be something that Scotty Weiss would do. Go from here. But we'll end up seeing what we see as we get close here. They haven't lit the fuse yet, but it should be coming any moment now. Some people wait till the red carpet.
Yes.
Right where you hit the red carpet, Chris.
Yeah, they do, and this is really exciting. So the 1 kilometer kite, they pass underneath it, and this is where, as we mentioned, it's all going to happen. They've been racing now for nearly an hour, but this is the only part that matters. They can do great work before now, but then give it away. They can do crappy work before now and then steal it from somebody else. The race is not over until you cross under it. Philip coming to the front there, Kopse on his tail. Plommers making sure that he marks his guy. Marina also the Team X rider, 2 Team X riders now. Maybe Plommers is working for his teammate here. Hard to tell. We'll see what happens at the end. And then Philip is doing a nice job, the British rider, of really pushing this forward, making sure that he's getting front of this thing, but it may not be enough. We'll see how this goes. Very exciting to see. Now, the Kopse caught in the mix here, but he's going to grab that wheel. He's going to jettison himself forward. Thrun is in that group as well. There goes Kopse. You can see him in the red right there, digging, head down, doing everything he can. He's got the momentum. He's going to get past a little bit, I think, by the Team X rider. Comes by him. Can he get second? Oh, maybe third now. Kopse hanging on. Oh, he did. He got third in the field sprint there. Plommers managed to come around him at the end and take it from him, timed it to perfection. These guys know each other real well, and if we're clever enough, we can jump back in time real quick and see what Plommers was able to do at the very end there. That's the great thing about Cycle View. We'll give it to you right now. You can see his sprint in the background. Look at this face as he's digging and doing everything he can. Oh, my goodness. That is beautiful. And you see it right there. Those are the top 3, Kali, Hendricks, Boson, and Afdal. And then in 5th, winning that sprint, winning that sprint was Afdal. Plommers in second place. Oh, Plommers in first place in that sprint. You had the 4 off the front. Marina, the Team Experimental rider, also coming around at the end, and Kopse finds himself in 3rd. But to his credit, the plucky little Quentin LaFay finds himself from Team Vision just on the heels. Almost, I think if there had been another 50 meters, we might have seen LaFay come around Kopse. Wow. Well, exciting.
I think 2 things. Team X maybe wanted to mention for team of the tournament, and
right.
Plommers is absolutely Frank, I can sprint. I don't know what you're talking about, but look who crossed the line first. But that was, what we're starting to see, and we've seen more of this through the postseason, and I think it is absolutely starting to dawn on people. We saw this in Team Poland to win the men's A bracket earlier today, final. Fantastic lead-outs in the sprint. Now, I will say that Team Poland had 3 people doing it, but Team X had 2 people here, and they timed it to absolute perfection. 1/100th of a second.
Wow.
They cross together within 1/100th of a second. They get Joachim across the line in first, and they beat Kopse, who you could see making a superhuman effort, by 9/10 or 9/100ths of a second. I mean, we're talking just hundredths of a second here in coordinated lead-outs and racing. That's fantastic racing. I think that what the postseason has done, it may change Zwift racing forever across the board, as people understand teamwork absolutely makes a huge difference in Zwift.
It does. It makes a huge, huge difference. And the teams have come together to do this. No more evident right now than Team PTZ shepherding Sandra Deegan up this final climb. They're getting close to their big sprint finish, but they have got her surrounded and taken care of. In fact, if you look at this, in the sprint not that long ago, she finds herself kind of off the front of the group that she was chasing there. There's a minute and a half to some of the riders that she was with briefly just a little bit ago. It'll be interesting to see if McPhail sprints it out with one of her other teammates to see who can win this today. Well, win. She's sitting about 20th in that B category today, which is still a great spot. They know that she was able to take this win today. An unfortunate way to have to win it, but you know what? She's put herself in the right position as she's gone along here. Oh, that's the wrong Lewandorf. That is the problem. I don't know if there's a CVR rule coming where we are only allowed to have one Lewandorf at a time. We'll discuss that, I'm sure, at a later date. But Anya unable to compete in the race today because of injury. Sandra Deegan and her team shepherd her to the line and make sure that there is no injury. Yes.
And Chris, if you've got that bracket graphic, if you could bring that up maybe on the side there. Thank you very much. So little anticlimactic today, and it looks like we've got the bracket from a week ago, so you can just sort of look at the end one here, having Anna and
draw the
Sandra.
map together.
Draw it together. And I think one of the interesting things I want to mention here is, while today's a little anticlimactic due to an injury and inability for Anna to start, this has been a long season. This is the postseason, but before this, there was 8 weeks of racing. Sandra has raced week in and week out, and this is a big end to the season. It's nice to be surrounded by your teammates, have a little bit of a parade today for her, but she should definitely feel proud for the accomplishment, and she's done a massive job throughout the season, and we're really happy to see her crossing the finish line today and winning the women's B bracket. Congratulations to
no kidding. And here comes the big sprint, and here are the well-wishers as you've gone along here. Stefan Lewandorf is saying thanks, as we mentioned him. R.A. Romot saying nice to these riders. B.J. Alfonso also watching. Matthias Wolf saying, go Marco. And, of course, Angela Webster, go Sandra. And here we see the big finish for her right now. Her teammate is going to line this thing out and see if they can't get a little bit of a kick for her. The question will be, is she going to try to outsprint some of these guys? My guess is that she is. She's doing the slow build up here. You look at that, you see that it get really, really low, but the watts per kilo never drop, and she's going to spin up and through this. Will she kind of kick it into high gear and pass any of her teammates? Doesn't look like that's going to happen. Well, maybe one. maybe just kind of inch him by, but this is not just a dead sprint. She says, thank you, McPhail. Oh, and she gives the thumbs up. Very, very nice. That's fun when you can hit some of those gestures. And she does. She finishes. It's a big finish for her, and very, very happy to see her win this division. Backs it off a little bit. As we put a bow on this women's B category one more time, there are some prizes that are going to come her way. Certainly, the pride of her entire team, everyone who helped, is part of this win. And I wonder if she is not in a position with the dominance that she's shown here to maybe make a category switch, as it were. Now, the categories are a little bit different here than they are in other places. Maybe just shed some light as we look forward to CVR LA, the major. Tell us just a little bit about how those categories kind of shape up.
Well, the way that we look at categories is they should be performance-based, and when we say performance-based, we don't mean what your 20-minute output is on a bike. We mean, how do you race? What are your tactics? What is your FRC versus your FTP? In Zwift, it's about attacks, even right out of the start gate. Can you stay with that? Yeah. So you can be a huge engine, let's say like Lionel Sanders. You could just, he's going to be able to put out amazing world-class time trial efforts. But what does he have on the top end? And how much has he raced in Zwift? Spoiler alert, he has raced in Zwift, so he is learning the tactics of Zwift. But that all makes a difference. And so what we look to see is how you perform in races, and then we categorize you based on that. So it's not about your power. It's about how well you perform in races. There's a little bit of confusion because Zwift racing heretofore has been more about just what your raw power numbers are. But I think as we're highlighting here in the postseason, it's not just about raw power. It's about tactics. It's about teamwork. It's about your ability to do a sustained attack or stay with a sustained attack in my case. And so that's what this is about, and that's how we categorize. So it's going to take a little time for people to get used to the performance-based bracket. We still get the questions like, well, hey, that guy's, normally in A, but he's racing in B. Well, he's got good power, but he never finishes high. So, yeah, he's in the B bracket. So that's how this works.
And I understand it completely. Well, so let's put a bow on this and say thanks to all those who are watching. You've been so patient here to the end, and we appreciate it. They want the good information. Saris, Cyclops, Garneau, Power Tap, of course, the Hunter Allen Peaks Coaching Group, and Helen Cycles, all participating in supporting this amazing event that's going to take place this Saturday at the Velodrome, the Staples Center in Staples Arena, rather. Wait, no, I said it wrong. I'm thinking Los Angeles, and Staples Center is where the basketball teams play. You definitely don't want to go see the basketball teams play this weekend. You want to come and actually see the riders and the velodrome there. I don't have the graphic handy for you, but I will bring it up for future broadcasts. Just by way of teaser, we have two fabulous races still coming up. We know that there has been some scrambling. Stefan Lewendorf making sure that he's got teammates around him. Also Mark Min making sure that he's got some teammates around him, although he does not have as big a Rolodex, a Frengenary, right? A dictionary. Okay, that was a terrible example. And they're going to race in just a little bit. They're in the E zone. Coming up in that F zone, we're going to see Simon Nielsen and Tommy Hadamaki face off in that final event in the men's C. These are great head-to-heads that you do not want to miss. And you do not, of course, want to miss what's happening this weekend. And we've mentioned it many times, but it's worth mentioning again. Don't get too far away from your streaming device on Saturday. There are some unbelievable matchups you're going to want to stay tuned to. You know these riders, and we hope that, of course, that you'll join us. Final thoughts, Frank, before we say goodbye to these folks just for a couple hours and a little less than 2 hours, and have them rejoin us.
Yeah, the Mark Min Ludendorff race should be very exciting. I know Mark has been out, getting people for his cause. Stefan has been posting videos, and so it's, can he win? Great fun, great social media interactions there, and I think that one's going to have a lot of fireworks and a lot of people working for each individual, and it should make for some exciting racing.
It should. The teams have changed a lot. It's really exciting. Well, thanks. We'll catch you in just short of 2 hours. Excited to see you. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you shortly.